So King Charles has basically placed Queen Camilla under house arrest at Highgrove House, and the reason why is way more intense than just family drama. We're talking about a full-blown treasure scandal, a secret evidence vault under Windsor Castle, and a conspiracy that somehow involves Swiss bank accounts, a random storage unit in Swindon, and a laptop hidden under a staircase. The whole thing reads like a royal thriller, but when you actually look at what was said versus what happened, the timeline of the lockdown itself is where it gets really interesting. The story starts just after dawn at Highgrove. King Charles walks out of his private study holding a sealed royal decree on thick vellum, which already tells you this isn't a normal domestic disagreement. He's wearing a dark green quilted barn jacket and thick tweed trousers, and his boots are crunching against the wet limestone chips on the gravel path. Two armed protection officers pulled the heavy iron gate shut and locked the deadbolts with what's described as a sharp metallic snap. The morning mist is hanging low over the gardens, and within minutes, every external landline internet router and mobile signal booster in the main residential wing has been physically disconnected. The king has issued an executive lockdown order restricting movement and communications for Queen Camilla, and the reason traces back to an emergency briefing with Prince William the night before. Now, before we get into the details, if you're enjoying this deep dive into royal drama, what Prince William apparently presented to his father was undeniable proof linking Camilla's domestic circle to missing crown treasures. We're not talking about a misplaced tea set. We're talking about rare silver heirlooms, 18th century porcelain sets, ceremonial regalia pieces, and even a solid silver gilt ceremonial mace that was quietly swapped out for a brass replica at the Tower of London 5 years ago. The total value of unauthorized asset sales tracked through intermediary accounts in Zurich and London exceeds £4 million, and the ultimate beneficiary signatures trace back to accounts controlled by people in Camilla's immediate circle. So that's the core allegation, but the lockdown itself is where the contradictions start piling up. The official explanation is that this was a necessary security measure to prevent evidence tampering and stop encrypted communications from leaving the estate. Intelligence reports indicated that encrypted messaging apps had been utilized from inside the manor to coordinate the transfer of confidential estate documents to external actors. So the security team physically disconnected everything, but here's the thing. Even after the central power grid was shut down, a handheld signal detector picked up a blinking indicator light coming from a hidden utility closet beneath the main staircase. Someone had wired an illegal satellite hotspot into an auxiliary power battery with a portable laptop tucked behind a stack of garden ledgers. This laptop was still transmitting encrypted data packets 40 minutes after the power cut. That detail alone raises so many questions. If the lockdown was a surprise, how is there a dedicated backup communications setup already installed and running? Someone knew this was coming, or at least knew they needed a contingency plan that could survive a full communications blackout. The laptop was logged into encryption software and actively transmitting to a destination server in London when the inspector found it. Who set it up? Whose user profile was logged in? And why garden ledgers of all things? Like, if you're going to hide a secret laptop, maybe don't put it behind the one thing an estate manager would actually need to access regularly. Anyway, the king orders the laptop sealed in an anti-static evidence bag and sent to the forensic cyber unit in London. Additional security personnel and unmarked vehicles arrive at the outer perimeter, and every access road is placed under armed surveillance. Highgrove has been transformed into a secure containment zone, and the staff inside are starting to panic. The household staff gathered near the grand staircase, whispering and casting nervous glances at the heavy oak doors leading to the private quarters. Then the estate manager steps forward to ask why the morning mail was halted and why all staff mobile phones were temporarily collected. Standard questions, honestly. But when the lead security officer checks the estate manager's personal phone, he finds 3 missed calls from an unlisted international number originating in Switzerland. And these calls came in just 5 minutes before the lockdown order took effect. That timeline doesn't add up. If the lockdown was a surprise, how did someone in Switzerland know to call 5 minutes before it happened? The security team runs a quick trace and discovers the Swiss number matches a private banking entity known to manage offshore accounts linked to shell corporations used in the missing treasure scandal. The estate manager wasn't just a guy who scheduled maintenance. He was an active conduit for moving illicit communications between the estate and foreign financial handlers. His phone also contained a secondary encrypted messaging thread with a list of 7 historical artifacts scheduled for transport out of the country later that evening, along with a private airfield in Gloucestershire selected as the departure point. So the lockdown didn't just catch the estate manager, it caught him mid-operation. The artifacts were literally scheduled to leave that night. If Charles had waited even one more day, those 7 items would have been on a cargo flight to who knows where. That's not a coincidence. That's a security breach that was actively in progress. Now let's talk about Prince William's evidence vault presentation, because this is where the paper trail gets really specific. William walked down into a secure basement archive beneath Windsor Castle, carrying a heavy metal lockbox. 2 protection officers followed with 3 large cardboard archive crates filled with financial ledgers. He swiped a security card, entered the reinforced room, and spread bank statements across a mahogany examination table under cold fluorescent lights. The document showed that historical artifacts have been systematically funneled through private shell companies over 4 years, over £4 million in unauthorized sales, with the money routed through Zurich and London. But the really clever part was how the items were physically removed from the palace without triggering the automated inventory tracking system. William pointed to a maintenance override form dated 2 years prior. The automated inventory scanners had been manually powered down for 3 consecutive days under the pretext of emergency electrical repairs. The maintenance order was authorized by a senior administrative director reporting directly to Camilla's private office. So think about that. Someone filed paperwork claiming the electronic tracking system needed emergency repairs, got that paperwork approved by Camilla's office, and then used that 3-day window to pack and ship historical artifacts out of the palace before anyone noticed gaps on the display shelves. That's not opportunistic theft. That's a planned operation that required inside access, administrative authority, and knowledge of the inventory system's vulnerabilities. But here's where it gets even more detailed. William also pulled out a small leather-bound inventory book from the bottom of the lockbox. This book contained a handwritten list of 7 replacement replicas that had been substituted into the display cases in place of the stolen originals. Someone crafted counterfeit porcelain pieces with forged hallmarks matching 18th century royal standards. Who made them? Which external workshop produced forgeries convincing enough to fool casual inspectors during routine monthly checks? Because you don't just find someone on Etsy who can replicate 18th century royal silver hallmarks. That requires specialized knowledge and equipment. The evidence also included a certified bill of sale from a private gallery in Zurich, showing that a matched pair of 17th century silver sconces had been sold to an anonymous buyer for £800,000. The transaction date fell just 3 weeks before the king's coronation. The Zurich Gallery apparently acts as a primary clearinghouse for high-end looted antiquities, using intermediary brokers to obscure the true provenance of items and shield buyers from scrutiny. Now, exporting 17th century royal silver out of the United Kingdom requires export permits and customs inspections. So how did the sconces leave the country? William produced a fraudulent customs clearance certificate bearing a forged export stamp from the Department for Culture, Media, and Sport. The certificate claimed the silver sconces were being shipped abroad on temporary loan for an international decorative arts exhibition that never actually took place. The export papers were signed by a corrupt civil servant who has since taken early retirement and relocated to the south of France. The exploitation of cultural export loopholes is genuinely fascinating because it reveals how the scheme worked. Items weren't smuggled out in the dead of night. They were shipped through official channels using forged paperwork that claimed legitimate state business. The corrupt civil servant received a substantial commission for every fraudulent certificate processed, creating a partnership between public officials and private antique traffickers. William also produced a small address book seized from the former civil servant's London residence, containing 24 handwritten entries with code names and encrypted bank account numbers. Charles apparently recognized the handwriting on the second page, which suggests this goes even higher up the political food chain. Meanwhile, an armed police sergeant was executing a separate warrant at a climate-controlled storage unit on the outskirts of Swindon. He pried open crate number 12 and found a collection of 17th century silver altar plates bearing the official royal cipher of King Charles I. These plates had been missing from the private chapel display at St. James's Palace for over 3 years. Insurance claims filed by the Household Administration had written them off as lost during routine renovation work, but they weren't lost. They were sitting in a commercial storage unit in Wiltshire, packed in custom-molded foam inserts. The shipping label on the underside of the foam insert bore the logo of a commercial catering company that routinely supplied banquet equipment for private royal dinners. That catering company's delivery trucks held permanent security clearance passes, allowing them to enter and exit palace service gates without undergoing physical cargo inspections. So the thieves literally used the trusted vendor network to smuggle high-value regalia out of the building, hidden beneath crates of dirty tableware and banquet linens. The catering company's logistics director orchestrated the transfers using his routine delivery schedule as cover. Honestly, the fact that no one thought to check the catering trucks for 3 years is the kind of security gap that seems obvious in hindsight, but brilliant in execution. Everyone focuses on the priceless artifacts and display cases. Nobody thinks about the dirty napkins and tablecloths going out the service entrance. The sergeant also found a stack of velvet-lined cases stamped with the royal coat of arms under a blue vinyl tarp. One case contained the ceremonial mace I mentioned earlier, the one that had been swapped swapped for a brass replica during a scheduled conservation audit 5 years ago. Forensic technicians found a small signal jamming device wired into the display cabinet's internal power outlet. The jammer emitted a continuous, localized frequency that blocked the vibration sensor from transmitting its status signal to the control room, creating a 30-minute window during which the glass case could be opened safely. The serial number on the jamming device traced back to restricted military-grade hardware typically reserved for specialized security operations. Active-duty technical contractors had been co-opted into the conspiracy. Back at Highgrove, Camilla's isolation was becoming absolute. Her personal secretary and 2 administrative assistants were escorted off the property. The head of domestic staff, a man who had served the estate for 12 years, entered the drawing room where Camilla stood by a cold fireplace. He placed his leather briefcase on the mahogany coffee table and told her the dismissed staff members were directly implicated in routing unauthorized communication traffic through the estate's auxiliary servers. Financial audit trails showed they had coordinated the transfer of inventory logs and shipping manifests to external commercial partners over 18 months. But the personal secretary apparently tried to shred 3 leather-bound appointment diaries in the kitchen sink just seconds before the security team breached the administrative office. An investigator retrieved a partially intact diary page from the plumbing trap. The page contained a handwritten schedule of clandestine meetings held at a private London hotel with international art brokers. The appointments coincided with the exact dates when major historical artifacts disappeared from the Royal Collection storage rooms. One circled entry dated 2 weeks prior raised the question of which prominent political donor attended that meeting and what role they played in financing the illegal shipments. Camilla didn't answer. She turned away from the cold hearth and looked at the closed door. The staff was gone. The protective barrier had dissolved. The afternoon sun dipped below the horizon, and outside armed patrol officers walked past the terrace. The antique grandfather clock struck 4. The estate chef delivered a simple tray with a pot of tea and a single porcelain cup, then turned to leave without speaking. When Camilla asked if any external deliveries had arrived, the chef replied that all delivery vehicles had been turned away by the armed guard unit. But a small padded envelope addressed to Camilla's private secretary had somehow slipped past the security screening checkpoint earlier that morning. The head of security brought it in inside a clear plastic evidence bag. The envelope contained a flash drive and a handwritten note with no return address. The note instructed the recipient to wipe all local server drives immediately to prevent forensic recovery. The digital signature on the message matched the IP address associated with the former Treasury Secretary who had falsified municipal property records years earlier. The outside conspiracy was still trying to reach inside the locked estate, desperate to erase the digital footprints. The security officer connected the flash drive to a secure portable reader, and the blinking light reflected in Camilla's eyes as she stared at it. Every external lifeline was being intercepted and decoded. The isolation was complete. 2 protection officers stepped further into the room, waiting for the final operational command from the Sovereign's office. Now, a lockdown of this magnitude doesn't happen in a constitutional vacuum. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer was walking down the long carpeted hallway of number 10 Downing Street with a red ministerial dispatch box when he received an emergency royal decree transmitted from Windsor Castle. He gathered his senior cabinet ministers in the room beneath the portrait of Sir Robert Walpole and told them the Attorney General had confirmed the decree bypasses standard family grievance procedures under ancient Crown Estate statutes. The decree invoked a 17th century constitutional clause, allowing the sovereign to suspend any household member or associate threatening the financial or structural integrity of the monarchy. This legal instrument bypasses usual parliamentary consultation periods, giving the king immediate executive power to freeze assets, seize private estates, and restrict personal movement without judicial delay. But here's the weird part. The cabinet secretary had not received advance notification through the standard inter-office courier service used by Buckingham Palace. The decree was hand-delivered directly to Downing Street by a senior military aide using a secure courier channel reserved exclusively for wartime national defense communications. Bypassing standard civilian administrative channels prevented partisan leaks from reaching the press before the Highgrove lockdown order could be fully enforced. The military-grade transmission route guaranteed absolute operational security during the critical opening hours, but it also means this was treated as a national security event from the jump, not a family matter. The Chancellor of the Exchequer raised the question of tax liabilities on the seized estates and asked whether revenue from liquidating recovered assets would return to the public treasury or remain within the sovereign grant account. Starmer replied that all recovered funds would be deposited directly into a dedicated public restitution account managed jointly by Parliament and the Crown Estate Commissioners. Previous financial scandals involving royal properties were often settled through private administrative agreements behind closed doors. The new restitution protocol establishes a binding legal precedent requiring full public transparency for every pound recovered. Then the Chancellor revealed something that honestly explains a lot about how this went undetected for so long. The accounting firm responsible for auditing the royal household had also provided private tax advisory services to the shell companies involved in the artifact diversion scheme. This conflict of interest allowed the firm to sign off on fraudulent inventory adjustments while simultaneously managing the offshore accounts receiving the sales proceeds. The firm collected millions in advisory fees for masking missing inventory as routine write-offs due to accidental loss or structural degradation. A missing 17th century silver chalice slipped through 3 successive national audits because the same people auditing the palace were also helping the thieves hide the money. At Buckingham Palace, Prince William walked across the polished marble floor of the throne room wearing a sharp midnight blue evening suit. Princess Catherine followed carrying a velvet folder containing newly finalized royal governance charters. William placed the charters on the velvet-covered podium before King Charles, who sat beneath the gold-embroidered canopy. William told his father that all regional estate offices, artifact inventories, and grace and favor housing allocations had been successfully transferred to independent oversight boards. Charles picked up a gold fountain pen and opened the leather folder to the signature page. The new charters permanently abolished the secret back channels that had allowed non-working relatives and unauthorized associates to exploit crown properties for decades. Every asset, from historic Gloucestershire manors to 17th century silver collections, is now cataloged under strict national heritage protection laws. Catherine pointed out a small embossed microprint embedded within the paper fibers, identifying the paper stock as a specialized archive grade reserved exclusively for constitutional transfer documents ratified by Parliament. The seal carries full statutory weight, legally binding the monarchy to parliamentary oversight for generations to come. Integrating statutory oversight into royal governance ends centuries of absolute financial autonomy within the household. Future financial audits will be conducted by independent national inspectors rather than internal royal appointees. A palace footman stepped through the side doors carrying a silver tray with a sealed dispatch envelope from the High Court containing the final injunction freezing the offshore assets and setting the date for the public auction of recovered items. Charles closed the leather folder and handed the gold pen back to William. Camilla remains confined to Highgrove, her staff dismissed, her communications severed, and the evidence against her inner circle locked in forensic databases. The monarchy has essentially performed open-heart surgery on itself, cutting out networks that had been operating for years under the cover of routine palace administration. The catering trucks, the fake maintenance orders, the forged export certificates, the compromised auditors, the Swiss bank accounts, the military-grade signal jammers, all of it connected through a web of trusted insiders who assumed no one would ever trace the paper trail back to them. But the paper trail was there the whole time, sitting in archive crates and plumbing traps in the bottom of locked metal boxes, waiting for someone to finally connect the